What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. In today's show, I sit down with Dave Goodfellow from Chester in the UK. Now, Dave specialises in the serviced accommodation sector, which often falls under the name of holiday letting or Airbnb. Now, it is just basically another investment strategy that I do think you should be aware of. And what I found particularly interesting in this discussion with Dave is how he turned what should have been a total disaster for his business, that is the COVID-19 pandemic, when all the lockdowns came along, how he turned that into a huge opportunity for him and his business partners' business to grow. As he put it, he ran towards the fire. And just by being resourceful and by having the right mindset, he managed to quadruple the size of the portfolio during the pandemic. So yes, I do think you're going to get a lot of value from today's episode. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Dave Goodfellow. You are listening to Behind the Facade. I am your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset, your behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. Dave Goodfellow, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. Really appreciate you having me on.
Not at all, Dave. It's a pleasure. And where does this podcast find you today? Where are you at the moment?
I'm actually over in Chester, sat in my offices for I've got a training academy, Iconic Training Academy. I'm sat in the office right now. So
Lovely. And we're going to get into all of the different interesting things that you've been doing in the last while. But just for the purpose of the audience, giving them a little bit of context, can you just tell us who is Dave and what does he do?
Yeah, for sure. No problem. So started my career. Wow. I've turned 40 last week. So the week before last, I've already lost the week. So 20 years ago, I started out in the home improvements industry, booking service engineers, and worked myself up to an ops director there. Went through the ranks, kind of went through all sorts of different things, worked at all different levels and did all sorts of different jobs in that, which kind of built me out to where I am today, really. When I was working for them, though, I was working away, going away on a Sunday evening, coming back on a Friday evening, feeling like a zombie for 2 days, and then getting packed up and going again. And my missus fell pregnant, and I was like, I can't do this forever, right?
I can't keep it going.
So I've got to think about another way of getting into something different to earning money. So I started reading a load of books. While I was doing all my traveling, I got onto all sorts of different mindset books and business books, and property was the one that always kept coming back to me, and it kind of resonated with me. I'd been in property before, but I didn't really know what I was doing, if that makes sense.
Accidental landlord.
Pardon?
The accidental landlord.
Absolutely. So I was kind of in property. I've been in property for 10 years. I was flipping property 10 years ago, because I was a project manager at the time. So I had all the trades around me. And I flipped a number of properties, but I didn't really know it was called flipping back then. Made loads of mistakes as well, but I won't go into that because I've probably made more mistakes than we could sit and have in a podcast. But they're character building, right? They're the things that you learn from. It's not a mistake if you learn from it. So on. So I built out a number of flips. Then I had a small buy-to-let portfolio. Got really sick of that, not being able to get pain in the arse tenants out, essentially.
Yeah.
And I changed. I got this one tenant I couldn't get out, and she was just a nightmare. Still owes me about $4,500 today. And I said to myself, right, how can I change this up so I can be in more control over my own properties? And so the serviced accommodation word come up. So I kind of switched my buy-to-let portfolio to that. Started that up 3.5 years ago. Realized pretty quickly that I needed to gain cash from that. It was a really good cash flow strategy, but I was getting chumps out from my flipping, and I needed to, do something different that brought me more cash in from each bill. So I went into rent to serviced accommodation, so renting other people's properties, selling them by the night rather than by the month, getting all the juicy benefits from that, creating cash flow, then buying more property. And then we got into, after building our own little portfolio out, we got into serviced accommodation management, so just managing other people's properties for them and then taking a cut of the deal, I suppose. And I've done that for the last 3.5 years, built that out. And we're now sort of acquiring old guest houses or hotels that are a bit run down. We say we're looking for faulty towers hotels, right? So Basel faulty, pass us your number, we'll take your hotel off, you buy it. And then we are then refurbishing them and turning them into apart hotels. So very hands off. Take all the operational space out. And when I say operational space, I mean sort of, the food, the beverage, any reception, that all comes out. We do it all hands off. It's all very techy. We use smart locking systems and stuff to get people in.
Right.
And we're building out them at the moment. Got a pipeline of them coming up. And the plan for the next 5 to 10 years is to build out 15 to 20 of those as a group structure, an propco company, and then sell it on to somebody who wants to buy it for chumpy money.
Nice one. It sounds like a good strategy. And tell us, I mean, when I think of serviced accommodation, it's interesting you're saying rent to service accommodation. So that's a kind of a piece of the pie that I hadn't considered. You're talking about hotels as well. Is that, bed and breakfast would also work, would it? Or is it specifically kind of hotel area?
Yeah, so in terms of what we're looking for old guest houses, bed and breakfasts, hotels, but we don't want the headache of having to cook breakfast.
Of course.
To pints or anything like that. We just want to take all that stuff out, but we change that space to what we call rentable space.
Right, I get you.
So, or where we can build another bedroom or another couple of bedrooms and sell that space as somewhere for people to accommodate people rather than for them to eat or drink.
And in terms of the length of duration of a stay, what would your typical stay be?
That depends. It very much depends on the area, right? So from a serviced accommodation perspective, when you're looking for a property, you want something that's going to give you what I call the sweet spot. So the sweet spot is where you get 4 days in the week filled with contractors or business days, and then your weekend stays are leisure. So what you're looking for is somewhere where you can, there's business, leisure, family travel, and then leisure. And you don't need the sun on a towel to be able to visit that city. So one of our main areas is Chester. So Roman city. It's, Chester Zoo's the most visited tourist attraction outside of London in the UK. It's just got lots of different elements to it that really work as serviced accommodation.
Right.
So in terms of the length of stay, the sweet spot is 4 and 2. Because normally you
2 nights of the weekend or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, your Sunday is normally a dead day. You can get a Sunday, then great. But you can get that sweet spot between the two. That's fun. That's a really good place to be. So that answer the question?
No, that's good. So it's 6 days out of 7. It's pretty much let if you can, yeah. And from the point of view of how much management is involved, because my impression is that when you're into that kind of thing, you've obviously got to have people in every day to kind of tidy it up and all that kind of stuff. Does it involve having to have a lot of people working for you, or can you do all of that outsourcing it now?
It most certainly does. Look, when people get into serviced accommodation, what they tend to look at is cash flow, right? And how much cash you're going to make. We call this the SA iceberg. So the cash flow at the top, what they don't understand is what's beneath that, right? Yeah. All these operational responsibilities that you've got to understand from a serviced accommodation point of view. So you've got lots of moving parts. You've got people checking in, people checking out, cleaners going in, maintenance teams going in and out. You've got, your linen that you've got to go and collect. You've got lots of different things that all come together at once, and they all sing and dance together. And if they're not joined up, you can just
have a crappy experience.
A real problem on your hands, right?
Yeah.
So essentially what we do is we have a system in the background that kind of looks after all that. We have some great teams, and we've got our own cleaning team that we've created a company for, and a maintenance company now as well. So we kind of work on them. We used to use outsource that. They've come in now. We have a system around that, so everybody can go into one place and look what they have to do, and it's all scheduled out and it all works in the background. Don't ask me how that works, because that's my business partner's job to do that. He's the techie guy that makes the glue stick together in all the different things that are happening. But yeah, you've got to have the way I position serviced accommodation, right? And this may offend some property people out there, but running serviced accommodation is like running a proper business. Okay, so it's got lots of elements to it. You know, you've got to have guest services, you've got customers and guests coming in and out of your properties. You've got so much more to it than just, you know, buying a property, setting it and forgetting it. Serviced accommodation is not that strategy, unless you've got a managing agent coming in and doing it all for you that can take all that off your hands. And they are few and far between.
Yeah.
Of course, we are one of those managing agents, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I figured. And tell me this, Dave, in terms of, I mean, speaking to, if you were talking to, say, somebody who has a property and is currently renting it as either just a single buy-to-let or as a HMO or something like that, I mean, how much more complicated is going for the serviced accommodation? And does it significantly improve your income to kind of go down that road? Can you just explain to us?
That's a great question, right? So, and I'm going to use the D word, depends, right? So serviced accommodation is very, very much dependent on the location of the unit, the criteria of a unit, because even areas can work, but areas within areas work as well. So location is really, really important. The criteria of property is important too. So in some cities or towns or places that we operate, you know, a 4-bedroom house will do really well. In other areas, a studio will do very well, but vice versa, they could also do not do so well. So we have to do a lot of data-led decision making, which we get a lot of software data from our software that we use, internal software and external software, that gives us you know, occupancy rates, price per night, all that sort of juicy stuff that will tell us what works and what doesn't. Now, I say there's always 4 things you need to make sure that you totally understand in serviced accommodation before you get into it and understand whether it works, right? And those 4 things are fixed costs, understanding them. What's that property going to cost you? Whether you're going to be
renting it
or not. Okay. Number 2 is your variable costs. So that's you know, your cleaning costs. So when people are coming in and out, what is it going to cost you in terms of the turnover and the cleans and all that sort of jazz? Number 3 and 4 work in together, and they are occupancy rates and price per night, or average daily rate. Now, if those 2 things don't work in tandem together, or all those 4 things work in tandem together, then that property may not work. So there's quite a lot of moving parts there.
It is a lot. And I mean, from the point of view of figuring out whether or not, because presumably this is one of the reasons why you also manage properties for people. You don't necessarily want to go and buy it, I guess, because you don't know how it's performing at the outset until you've got your hands in underneath the hood and you're kind of, okay, this works nicely. It would be a good one to buy. But prior to that, you're kind of in the blind a bit. You can be, if you don't understand how to analyze the market properly, right? So if you don't know how to analyze a serviced accommodation property, yes, you're absolutely right. We won't take a property on unless we understand those numbers in detail. And we know that property is going to work, and our forecasting tells us on a monthly basis that we're going to get X amount of pounds in this property. And we can do that from the deal analyzers that we use. Right.
But my business partner, again, is an ex-analyst. So he was a senior analyst for Bank of America. So he uses all these sexy tools, if you like, to help us understand what works and what doesn't.
I get it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how important is it from your perspective? I mean, you've got a business partner. You look after property, he looks after the data and stuff. How important is that partnership? I mean, would you be able to do this, the yin and the yang? Would you be able to do this on your own? Well, would you have succeeded on your own?
No. So I think Chris brings balance to the force when it comes to me and him. So I am very much the entrepreneur, the bull that goes out and wants to build Starship Enterprises and get to the moon tomorrow. And he's like, hang on a minute, Dave, let's just maybe rein that in a little bit and pull that back. And so I'm very much a negotiator, deal getter. I'll go out and organize and look for deals and get deals, but then he will make sure that it works, if that makes sense.
Before you've gone in there, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So the data actually can tell you a lot of information.
Absolutely. We tend to do the data stuff now before we go out and visit deals. So we're going in with going in to do the deal on an informed basis anyway. So we know what we can pay, we know how much. And once you start speaking to people in those terms and you've got the data in front of you, it gives you much more credibility anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're seen as an expert straight away.
Exactly that.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the yin and the yang thing is really important, right?
Yeah, I would have thought. I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily get. And one of the areas that I'm kind of really interested in is innovation and stuff. And I can remember I've spoken to quite a few venture capitalists on this podcast in the past, and we've talked about it. And what's the importance of your technical partner, your technical director is so key. These guys that come in from the industry side, so property guy got a great idea for an app or something, unless he has the tech co-founder with him, it's just not going to work. And it seems like something similar to what you're saying. So serviced accommodation is obviously kind of specialist in that regard, is that you can kind of fumble along in the property business without having a sort of a tech guy alongside.
Yeah. But without that in my business, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, if I'm totally honest. I'd have probably tried building something on the moon and got halfway there and failed.
and there's an area that I'm interested in, because obviously serviced accommodation, Airbnb, it sounds kind of familiar. Is it very different, or are they kind of one and the same?
No, they're pretty much the same thing, to be honest, Gavin. Yeah. Serviced accommodation, Airbnb, holiday lets, whatever you want to call it, really. The same sort of thing, just bundled up in a different name.
Yeah.
All very similar.
View of one of the reasons I wanted to kind of get into that question was, obviously the pandemic has had a big impact on people with Airbnb and people with leisure and the kind of hospitality sector. I was interested to know how you weathered that storm, because it was a pretty big storm and it knocked a lot of people over, but you've come through it well. And can you just talk to that?
Yeah, for sure. That's it's been a big, I mean, sounds really weird, but the pandemic was good for us in a way. So when everybody was kind of running away from the fire, I've very much got a mindset that I don't like to give up. And when people were kind of handed their keys back and, giving up on serviced accommodation, when Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, had come on and said to the nation that, you've got to stop traveling for leisure and business. Well, that was 100% of our business at that particular time.
Devastating. So.
Absolutely. And it wiped a lot of people out of the market, which, sounds awful, I know, but it was a good thing for us, because what did that do? It ended up being lots of people left the market. We ran towards the fire, we put it out. My whole mindset around that time was just focused on trying to sell our product on the market. And essentially what I had to do was break it down and look at the areas of the UK that would have been overrun in the pandemic, right? So if we think about, the areas that would be overrun, number one is going to be the NHS, because the NHS were just absolutely slammed with lots of cases and lots of issues. And so my first port of call was to phone our local NHS and speak to them about, because I know they have accommodation on their campuses.
Right.
So my whole thing was like, I'll phone them and I'll speak to the accommodation officer, because I knew they have an accommodation officer. Spoke to them and ended up filling around about 50% of our properties at the time with NHS staff. So doctors, nurses, radiologists, you name it, we had them in our properties.
Wow.
And they were staying for like 3 month periods. So they'd book a stay for 3 months, which means that, the price per nights weren't as much as what we would be getting if we were in an open market. But because there were such long stays and our operational costs with the turnovers were so low, we still made pretty good money out of it. And then my other port of call was like, well, key workers are still going to be working, right? So people who are working in power stations, they're going to be, people are all at home now. So there's going to be more power used in the home. What's going to happen there?
Yeah.
So I started focusing on, you think you catch my drift, right? I started focusing on the areas that were going to be overrun, drivers. There was lots of, Amazon had lots of drivers. There's loads of different areas that we kind of focused on and got lots of business from that. Now, our price per nights during that time were not fantastic, but because we had longer stays from contractors, the operational costs were lower, and we ended up making okay money out of it. But the great thing about that time is that because everybody else was leaving the market, well, that just opened us up to
expand,
business, right?
Yeah,
expanding. So we're just eating away at a bigger percentage of the market in our area. And then we, as we opened up again, we started going into different areas. We used our systems to help us do that. We can pretty much operate anywhere in the world now with the system that we've got. It's just a kind of cookie cutter effect, I suppose.
Is that an online platform that you use or that you've created?
So we've got a bit of both, to be honest. So we use an online channel manager, a platform. But we've also tied in a number of different aspects to that, which just bolster it and make it a much better system. What you tend to find with channel managers is they tend to be a jack of all trades, master of none, and you need to bolt on certain things to them to make them sing and dance, really.
Yeah,
and that's what we do.
That's
what
brilliant.
We have done.
I mean, and that's a great example of being resourceful in a situation where everyone else kind of sees only problems. You actually saw opportunity. So it's interesting from a mindset point of view, how you can turn it around for in your favor. How did it, in terms of growing the business, were you able to, like with a lot of people shutting down and getting out of the market, were you able to kind of grow your stock or the size of your portfolio during that time?
Yeah. We quadrupled the size of our portfolio.
Quadrupled, wow.
Quadrupled it, yeah. And also we acquired. We've been acquiring apart hotels as well. So where you've had pandemic hit a lot of guest houses and B&Bs and hotels really hard because they just had to close down. We didn't have to do that because of the way we were set up. But a lot of those types of businesses, they just had to close down, so it really hit them.
So is it the fact that you started speaking to the NHS and critical workers and stuff that allowed you to stay open?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, if it wasn't for that, we'd have been
You've been told, instructed to just close the doors and lock up.
We'd have been closing the doors. The other thing that we did as well, because all of our properties are on business rates, we were able to secure grants on them as well. So the government would give a grant per property, and that helped us big time as well. But we were able to grow from that, make some money, and then go out and start acquiring the apart hotels or the old guest houses that were run down as well, and people couldn't afford them. So we would go in and do deals with them, and we acquired a few guest houses as well over that period of time, which we started our first kind of refurb just a couple of weeks ago.
And in terms of acquiring those properties, did you do that from your own resources, or did you bring investors in and debt and things like that?
A bit of both. So the first apart hotel I bought with my own cash, and we've got development finance on that to develop it. The second one, we are using investment finance. So we're getting an investor to come in and help us with that. So
it's a combination. Yeah.
Combination of different things. And I think the reason why we've done it that way around is that we wanted to prove the model works with the first one, build that, and then, the investors will come off of that.
There's confidence.
Exactly that. It's the credibility build, right?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people don't like when somebody's learning on the job and they're getting paid to learn on the job. So by paying, you're putting your own money into it. You're learning on the job, but it's your money on stake.
Absolutely.
tell me this in terms of mindset shifts. I mean, between the pandemic, I mean, I remember I was in the beginning of the year in 2020. I was thinking this is going to be a great year. It's going to be, the start of a new decade. Every had all these great plans, and then 6 weeks into it, you're like hearing this word COVID-19, and you're starting to think, I wonder will it affect us? And I was actually in London giving a talk in March, and a couple of days later, the lockdown came into force, and I can remember being kind of caught off guard, not expecting it to actually happen that quickly. I mean, describe your mindset between being told that this pandemic is taking place and the lockdowns are actually going to be something that you have to deal with, to the point where you suddenly had your mindset shift and say, we can actually make this work for us. Was it panic at first, or how did you deal with it?
I'm not going to say what I said when Boris came on the TV and said what he said, because that wouldn't be good for your
listeners,
for the airtime. But I think what I did at the beginning, I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. I kept on pushing it back, which I think a lot of people did, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, that's not going to happen. COVID-19, what's that? And then when it hit us, it was like a reality check. It's like, wow, what are we going to do now? What do we need to do? And like, we've always been very much a business. Well, my business, I'm always very much somebody who'll sit back, we'll set goals, we'll set targets, we'll make sure that we've got the end goal in mind, right?
Yeah.
So it was just all about taking where we thought we were going to be. We gave ourselves what we did is give ourselves like a 6 month leeway, a 6 month break in our original plan, and then we built in a new plan into the new 6 months. Give ourselves another 6 month goal, because we knew we weren't going to grow at the extent. We didn't think we were going to grow to the extent of what our original plans were until we realized all these people were giving things back. But initially, we were like, right, we'll give ourselves a 6 month break. We'll revisit our plans, and we'll set a new end goal in mind. And we just did all the normal things that we would do, being consistent, making sure we're going out, looking for the deals, analyzing all the things that we would do in a normal environment. We did the same, but we just reevaluated our goals and set a new end goal in mind. And that worked really well for us, because I think in two ways. One, so we didn't beat ourselves up, because we had very big plans for the business for 2020. And two, it was kind of like a breath of fresh air for us, that we were able to kind of just sit back and go, hang on a minute, right? We don't need to put ourselves under pressure here. We're in a place where it's unprecedented. We don't know what's going to happen. So look, if something does just go a little bit awry, well, we just have to run with it. If we can get through this and we can build our business through this, then we'll come out the back of it a much stronger, more efficient business anyway, right? If we can do the business now and we can build now, then when the markets open up again, well, guess what we'll be like then?
Pole position, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be in, like you say, in pole position. So we just tweaked all sorts of different things in our businesses, our systems, our people, our houses. We were even going in and doing adjustments to them and making them nicer, and giving us time to look back on what our guests were telling us, and build a new customer journey out. There was just loads of things that we put together that just really solidified our business for where we are now.
Interesting. And how do you typically fill a space? Is it booking.com or one of those kind of things, or do you have a range of different solutions?
Well, we have a range of different solutions. So, Booking.com and Airbnb are the online travel agents that we use, but we have our own website. We do direct booking, calls. We've got a plethora of things we do outside of the OTAs. And the reason why we kind of built those things out is because, well, we had to when we were in the midst, because Airbnb and Booking.com turned off. So we weren't getting any business from them. 100% of our business was direct through our website or our activities that
your outreach program. Yeah,
exactly that. Speaking to local companies, getting on LinkedIn and Facebook and doing adverts and, connecting with people in local businesses, or, getting into the NHS and speaking to them, or whatever it was. It was just being more, just, if it did anything, it made me a lot more creative about how to pull business in.
And innovative as well, yeah.
And innovative, yeah, exactly that.
Interesting. Tell me this. So you've also, your lessons that you've gone through there are obviously, they've taught you a lot of things and a lot of lessons that can be sort of passed on to others. So you've created a training academy as a result. Yes. And is that in the whole service to accommodation space?
Yeah, absolutely. So our iconic training academy, again, was built during the pandemic, because we were still acquiring properties when people were not, and just failing. We were filling our properties when people were not, they were failing. So we thought, well, what we're doing can help other people, right? So we created a training academy where we took, we built out training courses. We did some one-to-one mentorships where we do them by Zoom calls. We built out a full training program online called our Service to Accommodation Roadmap, or the SA Roadmap, which went from, starting up, not knowing anything, all the way up to, creating systems and bringing virtual assistants in and that run your business for you, so you can work on the business and not in it. And we sold them through the pandemic too, and we helped, lots of people build service accommodation businesses too. So yeah. Iconic Academy was and then that's one of the things I like about the training academy is it sounds really cheesy, but I like imparting knowledge on people. I don't think there's anything more satisfying than.
I get it. No, that's one of the reasons that I started my podcast. Actually, there's a lot to be gained from it. I get a lot of satisfaction just helping others and sharing. Exactly. Kind of often the best thing is telling people the mistakes you've made, because those are the biggest lessons, really.
Yeah, well, one of our strap lines is let us make the mistakes so you don't have to, right?
Good one, yeah.
Because anything anything that we've done in the past and we've made a lot of mistakes. Don't get me wrong, right? We've made hundreds and hundreds of mistakes, and I'm not precious about telling people that. I make mistakes all the time. Now, but if I've made them, the likelihood is that I've got a resolution for that, right?
Yeah.
So if you come to us and you want training in service accommodation, then I'm going to be able to, if you come to me with a problem or an issue that's happened to you, I'm more than likely going to say, remember this time and this is what happened. But listen, that happened to us and we lost a bit of money there, but this is what we did to put something in place to make sure it didn't happen again. And that's valuable. Yeah, that's value. The power of training, right? Or mentorship or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, the fact that you've steered your way through this pandemic, there's an awful lot to be taught to other people on, in case it happens again in the future, and basically kind of help to guide them. Dave, I wanted to just get your steer on, in terms of the market, like where it's at. It's obviously very, very heated up in recent times, and the bargains that we were all finding 2 years ago have suddenly disappeared, and there's an awful lot more people kind of buying into the market. What would your take on the market be? Like, where are we going in the next couple of years?
That's a great question. So I think it depends on the market that you're in, what you're looking to do. So if you're looking to buy single properties and do the buy, refurbish, refinance model, I think that's getting more difficult. I think because of price increases. Certainly within our areas that we operate in some, not all of them, but some areas, it's more difficult to find that value in the property. So I think going forward, we're definitely, in my book, I don't think we're going to see a reduction in house prices in the next 18 months. There's too much money being pumped into the economy at the moment. Rishi Sunak's keeping these keeping us
the defibrillator.
Yeah, he keeps on pumping a little bit more in, and that's not going to stop. That's still generating business in the economy. But I think the key thing for investors right now is understanding where you can add the value to to certain properties. So, for example, commercial property to residential, where can you add value? Are you looking at multi-units under one roof rather than doing single units? I think there's a lot more. You'll get a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? You'll gain a lot more if you start looking at value add to a building under multi units under one roof than what you will get from single properties at the moment.
Yeah.
And there's loads of them out there, loads of strategies out there that you can use to add value. For us, for example, our serviced accommodation model, if we take a commercial building, we can add value to it. We can add value in different ways to what, somebody else might be able to add value to it, which means we can pay a little bit more for it. Yeah. And I think that's the key. So understanding where that value add is and just getting that uplift on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I'm conscious of time, Dave. I was going to ask your advice. I mean, you said you just turned 40 last week.
Yeah.
And looking back on your career and knowing what you know now, if you had an opportunity to speak to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I'd have got myself out of my job earlier. Okay. I'd have got mentored by somebody in the property profession, paid good money for it, to give me that fast track laser focus. And I would have got into property a lot earlier and get out of my job essentially and do it full time a lot earlier. If I could go back and do that, that'd be the first thing I'd have a little quiet word in my ear about. Now, if I had gone back though and said that to my younger self, would I have listened? Probably not.
Yeah, I know. And the other question what often pops into my mind, if I had given myself all this great advice as a young lad, you would have made all this extra money and then you could have gone and blown it by kind Absolutely. Of like, oh, look at me, I'm making all this money.
My values back then were completely different to what they are now, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's getting it inside people's head that you need to be kind of disciplined and you need to kind of keep a lid on the kind of excitement that you've made some money. You're going to give it back in another deal somewhere along the line. And so to just bear that in mind. Continuous
investment, I would probably say to myself as well.
Yeah.
Don't just take that money and spend it. Just keep reinvesting. And at some point, that compounding effect's just going to
create a monster. Itself, right? Yeah. Well, Dave, what's the best way for people to find you if they want to reach out? Oh, wait, before we go there, I forgot to mention Clubhouse. Let's just tell us about your Clubhouse room, because that is how you and I are connected in the first place.
Yeah. So We Talk Property is the club. We run a room every morning from 7:30 till 8:30 GMT, just in case you're listening across the world. That's called the Property Coffee Meet. And we talk everything property, mindset, anything you want. We kind of talk about in that room, Monday to Friday, 7:30 till 8:30. It's a great room. There's lots of great mods in there. It's very interactive on Clubhouse. People come up from the audience, ask questions, we answer them, and we just have a good chat amongst ourselves, and we have a bit of fun as well. So
yeah, I can vouch for that. I've joined in a couple of times. Dave, thanks so much. If somebody wanted to reach out and connect or check out your training or any of that kind of stuff, what's the best place to find you?
You can find us on Facebook, and I've got a community on there, the Iconic Property Community. That's a group. If you want to come in there and join, then feel free to do so, and you can reach me in there.
And Iconic is spelled with a K, just for
yes, people. It is Iconic with a K, IKONIC. Thanks for that, because I wouldn't have put that in there.
Yeah, I was just thinking people all typing in. I don't see Iconic in there.
Yeah.
All right, Dave. Thanks so much for your time, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, please take a moment to leave a review over on iTunes, or indeed share it with a friend. This really helps the podcast grow and reach more people. If you have any questions, please connect with me via the Facebook group Behind the Facade Community. Alternatively, you will find me on social media under my handle Gavin J. Gallagher. And you can stay up to date with all the projects I am working on by joining my tribe. Do that by adding your name and email over on my website, gavinjgallagher.com. That's all for now. See you back here next week.